Hello students, welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am Dr. Kapendra from Kirodimal College, University of Delhi. Today we are going to discuss about the module Marine Ecosystem under paper Principle of Ecology. After studying this module, you shall be able to understand the type of ecosystem, classify the aquatic organisms on the basis of their zone of occurrence, know physico-chemical properties of marine ecosystem, understand the different biota of ocean, learn about estuary and its biotic components. The living organisms and the environment, including all abiotic component such as water, air, temperature, etc., are interrelated and interact upon each other so that a flow of energy lead to a clearly defined trophic structure, biotic diversity and material cycles. The term ecosystem was proposed by British ecologist A.G. Tansley in the year 1935. The ecosystem represents the basic functional unit of ecology that can be explained as a system formed by the community and the environment. The central theme of ecosystem is that the living organisms of a community not only interact among themselves but also have functional relationship with their non-living environment. Our Earth can be considered as a giant ecosystem represented as biosphere in which biotic and abiotic factors continuously interact with each other. The biosphere is a vast ecosystem and difficult to study as a whole. Therefore, for the convenience of study, it can be divided into following major types. The first is terrestrial ecosystem such as forest, grassland, deserts, etc. Second is aquatic ecosystem, which includes freshwater or marine ecosystem. In this module, we will discuss about marine ecosystem in details, whereas terrestrial ecosystem and freshwater ecosystem will be discussed in other modules. Aquatic ecosystem waters cover about 3/4 of the Earth's surface, either in the form of freshwater having salt concentration less than 0.5% or as marine water having salt concentration more than 3.5% or as a brackish water with salt concentration intermediate between freshwater and saline water. It is on this basis that aquatic ecosystems can be categorized into first freshwater ecosystem. It may be lotic, that is running water like river, streams, etc., or lentic, that include standing water such as lake, pond, etc. Second is marine ecosystem, and that is shallow water seas and open ocean. And third is brackish water ecosystem like estuaries, salt marshes, etc. Classification of aquatic organisms. Aquatic organisms found in the different types of aquatic ecosystems are classified on the basis of their zone of occurrence in water body and their ability to cross these zones. These organisms are unevenly distributed in the ecosystem and are classified on the basis of their life form or location into 5 groups. The first is Neuston. These are unattached organisms which live at the air-water interface, such as floating plants and several types of animals such as water striders, while others spend most of their time just beneath the air-water interface and obtain most of their food within the water, such as beetles, backswimmers, etc. Second is periphyton. These organisms which remain attached or adhere to stems and leaves of rooted plants emerging above the bottom mud. It includes sessile algae and their associated group of animals. Third is plankton. It includes both microscopic plants and animals. The locomotory activity of the planktons is limited, which restrict their distribution. Plankton are divided into phytoplanktons, mainly algae, and zooplanktons, mainly crustaceans and protozoans. Fourth is nekton. This group contains animals which are active swimmers. Their relatively large size and powerful body can overcome the water currents. The animal can be ranged from swimming insects to the largest animal, that is blue whale. And the fifth one is benthos. The benthic organisms are living in or on the bottom region of the water. They show a variety of adaptation to the environment because bottom is more heterogeneous than open water or the surface. Factors limiting the productivity of aquatic habitat. The most important factors that affect the productivity of an ecosystem are sunlight and oxygen. It distinguishes aquatic ecosystem from the terrestrial ecosystem where moisture and temperature are the main limiting factors. The main factors which control the productivity of aquatic ecosystems are: first, sunlight. It is a major limiting factor for water bodies as light gradually diminishes when it passes down the column of water. The upper layer of the aquatic ecosystem, up to which light can penetrate the water and within which photosynthetic activity is confined, forms the photic zone. The depth of photic zone can be determined by the transparency of water. Second is temperature. The temperature of water body declines very slowly than the temperature of air because water has relatively higher specific heat than air. Since water temperature are less subject to change, the aquatic organisms living in the water are stenothermal. As a result, even small changes in water temperature can lead to higher mortality in the aquatic organisms as comparable to changes of temperature in air where terrestrial organisms are present. Third is transparency. Clearness of water influences the extent of light penetration in aquatic ecosystem. It is indirectly related to turbidity. Suspended particulate matters such as clay, silt, and phytoplankton make the water turbid. As a result, the extent of light penetration can significantly affect the photosynthetic activity of aquatic plants. Fourth is dissolved oxygen. Oxygen in the terrestrial ecosystems occur in the atmosphere along with other gases in a mixed concentration. However, in aquatic ecosystems, oxygen is present in water as dissolved state, where its concentration varies depending on various factors that influence the input and output of oxygen in water. In fresh water, the average concentration of dissolved oxygen is 0.0010% by weight, which is 150 times lower than the concentration of oxygen present in an equivalent volume of air. The concentration of dissolved oxygen in the aquatic ecosystem depends entirely on the photosynthetic activity of aquatic plants or air-water interface through which oxygen enters into the aquatic ecosystem. Moreover, water turbulence and wave activity in open water increases the rate of oxygen transfer from air to water. The transfer of oxygen is also affected by the surface area of the water. A wide, shallow section of a river has a larger surface area for oxygen transfer than a narrow, deep segment. Dissolved oxygen escapes the water body through air-water interface and through respiration of organisms. The amount of dissolved oxygen retained in water is also influenced by temperature, as oxygen is less soluble in warm water. Warm water also enhances decomposition activity. Therefore, increasing the temperature of a water body increases the rate at which oxygen is depleted from water. Marine ecosystem. Marine ecosystem is one of the largest reservoir of water. The total biomass in the marine ecosystems far exceeds that of all freshwater ecosystems put together. Marine ecosystem consists of seas and oceans that cover 70.8% of the Earth's surface and hold around 97% of the Earth's water. The total volume of marine ecosystem is approximately 1370 into 10 raised to the power 6 kilometer cube and has an average depth of 3750 meter. As being the largest reservoir of water, oceans strongly influence climate by regulating the hydrological cycle on Earth. The Pacific Ocean is the largest marine ecosystem with 179.7 into 106 kilometer square area. It is the coldest and least saline ocean. The Atlantic Ocean is warmer and more saline. The Arctic Ocean is smallest and shallower, whereas the Antarctic Ocean bears wide variation in temperature, ranges from -1.8 degrees Celsius to 10 degrees Celsius. The Indian Ocean covers 77 into 106 km square area with an average depth of 3872 meters. Physicochemical properties of marine ecosystem. Marine ecosystems are of great ecological significance and have certain silent features. The first is salinity. The sea is salty and its salinity is quite constant, averaging about 3.5%. Sodium chloride is the main salt, being 27%, while the rests are chloride, sulfate, bicarbonates, carbonates, calcium, potassium, and magnesium salts. The salinity of marine water vary from one place to another. Second is light. It acts as a limiting factor in the ocean as it significantly contributes to the biomass production and distribution of marine flora and fauna. On the basis of penetration of light in water, ocean can be divided into two horizontal zones. The first zone is photic zone or euphotic zone. Photic zone of sea reaches from water surface to a depth of 200 meters. In this zone, light penetrate and support the process of photosynthesis in aquatic plants. This zone is also known as epipelagic zone, which is characterized by gradients of light decreasing from top to the lower level, temperature and salinity. And second zone is aphotic zone. It is present below photic zone and distinguishable into three further subzones. The first, mesopelagic zone. This zone extends from 200 meter to 1000 meters. It is semi-dark zone where negligible amount of light penetrates in it. The temperature gradient is almost even, show gradual decline with depth and without much seasonal variation. Further, this zone contains a minimum oxygen concentration and a maximum of nitrate and phosphate salts. Second, bathypelagic zone. This zone extends from 1000 meters to 2000 meters and there is almost complete darkness as the light is not able to penetrate this zone. Third zone is abyssopelagic or benthopelagic zone. This zone is completely dark and temperature is low and uniform at 3 degrees Celsius. Also, the pressure, hydrostatic pressure is enormous. Now, third property is temperature. The range of temperature is in the ocean and seas are less than land temperature. Also, the temperature remains almost constant in the oceans in contrast to the land or terrestrial ecosystems. The temperature ranges from 2 degrees Celsius in the polar sea to around 32 degrees Celsius or higher in the tropical seas. The annual difference of temperature usually not exceeds more than 6 degrees Celsius in any part of the sea. Fourth property is concentration of nutrients. the marine environment is low in concentrations of dissolved nutrients, which, since they occur in very little amount, are measured in parts per billion. In contrast, the salt concentration present in higher amounts, such as sodium chloride, is measured in parts per thousand. As the nutrients are present in low amount, they act as limiting factor in the productivity of marine ecosystem and determining the size of marine populations. Fifth property is alkalinity. The sea is alkaline as the electrical dissociation force of cations exceed that of anions. Further, it is buffered and has a pH of 8.2 normally and so resist changes in pH. Sixth property is pressure. Pressure of water increases as the depth increase, which varies in the ocean from 1 atmospheric pressure at the surface to 1000 atmosphere at the greatest depth. Pressure changes in the sea are several times higher than on land and so have a prominent effect on the distribution of life in sea. Seventh property is continuity. The sea is continuous body of water. All oceans such as Pacific, Indian, Arctic and Antarctic are connected together. However, several abiotic factors like salinity, temperature and depth of sea restrict the distribution and free movement of marine organisms. Eighth property is depth. The sea is very deep, varying in different regions. Generally, life extends to all depths but is confined more to the continental shelf and islands. Ninth property is current. The seawater is never static and is in continuous circulation by means of water currents. It may be driven by wind, cosmic forces, and varying water densities. Most worldwide water current occurs at the surface and at great depths of seawater. These currents determine the interchange between the surface and deep water masses as well as horizontal movements. Tenth property is waves and tides. The sea is dominated by several kinds of waves and tides which are produced by the pull of moon and sun. 11th property is circulation of nutrients in the coastal zone. Circulation of nutrients from the sea bottom to the upper surface occurs in the coastal region by two processes. First is upwelling. It occurs where the wind causes the surface water to be blown offshore, which are replaced then by the cold, nutrient-rich water from the deep. Second is outwelling process. It occurs where the sea is enriched by nutrient-rich estuaries water entering into it. Organization of marine ecosystem. The marine habitat is distinguishable into two zones. It forms the basin or floor of the ocean regardless of depth. Horizontally, it is divided into two subzones. The uppermost portion is called supralittoral zone, comprising the beach down to the edge of the ocean. Beyond this is the littoral zone, which represents the area between the upper and lower tide level, and is therefore also known as intertidal zone. Littoral zone is the shore of the ocean. Next to this is the sublittoral or continental shelf, which extends from the littoral zone to the commencement of the continental slope. The continental shelf is the extension of underwater continent and its depth extends from 125 meters to 200 meters. Next to continental shelf, there is a rapid decline occurs and this is called the continental slope. After some distance, the continental slope from the continental rise which may be geological active. This region has canyons and trenches which are responsible for underwater eruptions and avalanches. The continental slope and rise together constitute the Bethel zone. The Bethel zone is 200 meters deep, which descends rapidly to a depth of 3000 or 4000 meters. Second is pelagic zone. It represents the free water zone filling the basin, which is further divided into the neritic zone that is situated above the sublittoral zone and deep open sea of the oceanic zone, which is divided on the basis of light penetration. Biota of oceans. The marine organisms can be categorized on the basis of depth into littoral, neritic, pelagic and benthic zones. Biota of the littoral zone. It is the shore region where is continuously disturbed by the waves, tides, temperature, salinity and light. The animals are largely dependent on planktons and detritus or dead particles. The non-diatoms and other algae are also found in this zone. Biota of the neritic zone. This zone occurs below littoral zone and constitutes about 75% of the area of ocean. The structure of community changes with changes in depth. This zone shows high productivity as the light can reaches to the depth and also exhibit higher species diversity due to presence of abundant nutrients. Biota of pelagic zone. This region constitutes 90% of the total ocean surface and is less rich in species and number of organisms. The most abundant pelagic phytoplanktons are still the dinoflagellates and diatoms. Larger swimming animals are also present in open ocean water. Fourth, biota of benthic zone. It extends from boundary of continental shelf to the deepest oceans. In the complete dark, plants are absent and only heterotrophic communities are present which live in the mud surface and bacteria. The deep benthic zone is rich in diversity through strange occupying cold and dark space, survive under intense pressure and scarcity of food. Estuary. Estuary is a zone where freshwater rivers meet the salty water of the ocean, resulting in brackish water, intermediate in salt content and water density. They forms the transitional zones called ecotone between the sea and rivers, possesses unique biological makeup. Features of estuaries. The physicochemical properties of the estuaries have large variation and it forms a stressful environment for the organisms living there. This is the one region which causes few larger organisms in this area as compared to smaller organisms. The most peculiar feature of the estuary is the fluctuation in salinity, which forms a gradient that varies seasonally with the topography, tides and amount of fresh water. There is deposition of sand particles which is controlled by water current and size of sand particles. If water current is strong, it causes deposition of coarse particles like sand. However, in the calm or low water current, then only fine silt will settle down. These particles have many organic origins which derived from both the terrestrial and marine movements. As a result, the accumulated substrate is very rich. Another important factor is temperature, which fluctuates rapidly and continuously, either heats up or cool down under prevailing atmospheric conditions and freshwater input. Temperature variation is also present vertically. The surface water of estuary is higher than deeper waters. All these variations, that is salinity, texture of the substrate, temperature and organic matter content and available oxygen is controlled by wave action and currents. The wave action in the estuaries is small. As a result, there is deposition of fine sediments and development of rooted plants. Water current in estuaries are caused primarily by tide action and river flow. Water currents are generally confined to channels, but velocities sometimes can reach up to several knots. The higher velocity is observed in the middle and lowest is found at the bottom. The water current is also responsible for two important natural processes in the estuary called erosion and deposition. However, the process of deposition of different organic and inorganic contents in estuaries dominates erosion process, results in net deposition of silt. During the part of the year when water movement is very slow, leads to reduced content of oxygen, algal blooms and occurrence of fish death. Biota of estuaries. The estuarine community is a mixture of three components: marine, freshwater and brackish water. The plants of the estuary are of four basic types, that are phytoplankton, marginal marsh vegetation, mud flat algae and epiphytic plants growing on the marginal marsh vegetation. The animals of estuaries are also related to wetland such as marshes and swamps. The commonly found estuarine animals are oyster, crabs, clams and lobsters. So students, let us summarize what we have learned in this module. The ecosystem can be classified into terrestrial or aquatic ecosystem. Aquatic ecosystems are categorized into freshwater ecosystem, marine water ecosystem and brackish water ecosystem. Organisms living in the aquatic ecosystems are classified as neuston, periphyton, plankton, nekton and benthic organisms. The most important factors that affect the productivity of an ecosystem are light, transparency, temperature and oxygen. Marine ecosystem is one of the largest reservoir of the water and has greater ecological significance. Marine ecosystem has several physico-chemical properties including salinity, light, temperature, nutrient, alkalinity, pressure, continuity, water depth, water current, waves and tides and circulation of nutrients. Marine habitat is distinguishable into two zones, that is benthic zone which forms the basin or floor of the ocean and other is pelagic zone that represents the free water zone. The marine organisms can be categorized on the basis of depth into littoral, neritic, pelagic and benthic zones. Estuary is a zone where freshwater rivers meet the salty water of the oceans that results in brackish water, that is the intermediate in salt content and water density. The physico-chemical properties of the estuaries have large variation and it forms a stressful environment for organisms living there. The plants of the estuary are of four basic types that includes phytoplankton, marginal marsh vegetation, mud flat algae and epiphytic plants growing on the margin marsh vegetation. The commonly found estuaries animals are oysters, crabs, clam and lobsters. Thank you.